Hello and welcome to episode 85 of the Casual Try Hard podcast. I'm Brian.
And I'm James.
And this week we're going like big, overarching, leveling the battlefield game magic theory as a topic.
Yeah, like this was when we first started doing this show, like almost 2 years ago now. Is that right?
Like 18 months, yeah.
Yeah, a long time ago. This was the show that I wanted to do way back then. And it's kind of a whole lot of behind the scenes work to get it done because I had to pull from a whole bunch of really old articles to do it. But I'm excited about this one.
Okay. So
and then we're going to put it to work later on.
Yes. So if you want to get at us on Twitter, you can tweet at us at CasualTryPod.
Yep. You can hit us up on Facebook at CasualTryHardMTG. You can also shoot us an email at show@CasualTryHardMTG.com. Check our email pretty frequently, so feel free to drop us a line there. Don't forget, if you're looking to pick up any singles, use our TCG Player affiliate link, tcg.casualtryhardmtg.com. Anything you order after following that link, we'll get a small percentage of to help keep the show going, so make sure you're using that if you're buying singles. If you want to support us a little bit more directly, you can do that at patreon.com/casualtryhardmtg. Our patrons get early access to show notes, and they also get to hear us ramble on about who knows what during our pre-show when we're checking mics and talking about the show or whatever. The pre-show I typically post on Tuesdays. The show notes usually go up Wednesday, right before the show comes out on Thursday.
Yeah, so it's all about how quickly I get it processed.
Yep. We also have a YouTube channel, Casual Try Hard MTG. Right now, it's basically just another place to find the show, but occasionally we do put up some videos there. When we do our set review for Zendikar, that's where that will post. So you can keep an eye out for that too, if you want to follow along with us and see the cards that we're talking about. And don't forget that we have a Discord channel. The link should be pinned on Twitter, on our Facebook page. If you can't find it, let us know. We'll shoot you a copy of the link. There's probably a link in the show description. We had some pretty good conversations in there this week, so kind of excited that it seems to be doing well. So Make sure you check that out.
So, like I said, this is going to be kind of a big show.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of under the heading of card evaluations and like learning how to do that. But the first thing that I think we're going to end up doing is kind of talking about the basic like structure of the game of Magic, not from like how a turn's put together, but like how you win games / like accrue advantage in like the biggest way possible. And then once we hopefully give everyone like a framework or a grasp on that, we can then move on to like looking at how cards fit into this like construct that we've made, hopefully.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to get through all of this in one show, so this will likely spill over till next week, and then we'll kind of finish this whole thing off by evaluating some new Zendikar cards in our set review. So kind of overview for the next 3 weeks.
Yeah. So the first thing we're going to talk about is one of the early attempts to kind of summarize and like wrap up Magic, and that is something called the Philosophy of Fire.
Yeah, this was an old article by Mike Flores, and a lot of these come from kind of understanding what a card is worth. And the easiest way to do that is by relating it to like red deck wins, because that's a deck that typically everybody has some amount of experience with, and the cards are simple, for lack of a better term,
and for the most part interchangeable.
Right, yeah. So it's easier to apply principles to those and then kind of expand from there than it is to pick some obscure card and try to find out how it works. So you're going to hear us reference some like red deck win style cards a lot. Basically, Mike Flores breaks down the game breaks down what your cards are worth into 3 different categories. One of them is that one of the cards in your hand is worth one of the cards in your opponent's hand. So this is like a 1-for-1 removal spell, right?
Yeah. So the term like trading 1-for-1. You're trading one of your cards for one of your opponents.
Yeah, like if you Heartless Act your opponent's creature, you traded one of your cards for one of their cards. If you cast a Duress, you're trading a card in your hand for a card in your opponent's hand.
Yes.
The second thing is that access to more cards out of your deck is worth some portion of your life total. So if you can gain the extra resource of a card out of your deck, you should be willing to, pay some amount of life for that. We've had a whole bunch of examples of this over the years. Dark Confidant is one. This article references Necropotence, which is like the old school way of doing that. Sign in Blood is another one where you are trading your life for cards out of your library.
Sign in Blood is black, scry 2, draw 2, or just black, draw 2?
Pay 2 life, draw 2 cards.
Okay.
Yep. And like Treacherous Blessing is like the newest version of this card, where it's 2 and a black for the enchantment that you draw 3 cards, and then every time you cast a spell, you lose a life.
Yeah.
This Treacherous Blessing, right? I probably should have looked that up.
That is. We're real close to it.
Yeah. So this is just kind of the idea that, cards out of your library are worth a portion of your life total.
And there's a lot of decks that they are worth all but your last life point. Like, think about like Ad Nauseam.
That's what I was just going to say.
3 black, reveal cards off the top of your library and take damage equal to each card's converted mana cost, and you just keep going till you want to stop. And people will just go until they have it's like, well, I have 6 life. I know I have 2 5-drops in my deck. I guess I should stop now. But they will just go till they are at the point of, okay, I can lose if I go any further.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, you're willing to pay almost any amount of life for resources.
Greatness at any cost, right?
That's right.
And then the last thing that he outlines in this article is that one of your cards is worth some portion of your opponent's life total. Now, this is kind of where it relates back to Red Deck Wins, where Lightning Bolt is that one card in your hand, the Lightning Bolt, is worth 3 points of your opponent's life total. So these are ways to kind of identify. You can break it down and say what the card is worth by looking at it in these terms. You can say that if you're comparing Shock and Lightning Bolt, if your measure is one card is worth 3 life points versus one card being worth 2 life points, obviously that's not as good, right? It's just kind of a way to measure things.
And
same thing.
Also, another way you can think about it is the Shock trades for less of your opponent's creatures than the Lightning Bolt does.
Mm-hmm. That as well. It's the same way with trading your life for additional cards also. Sign in Blood probably isn't as good as Necropotence, because you're trading 2 life for 2 cards with a 1 card initial investment, versus Necropotence where you can trade 6 life for 6 cards with the same 1 card investment.
So for everyone who's not a dinosaur, see if I remember,
right.
Necropotence is black for enchantment, and you skip your draw step.
Yep.
And then you can pay
1
life to draw a card.
Well, no, you don't just draw a card.
You set it aside and you put them in your hand at the end of the turn, right? At the end of your turn.
Yep.
So people will play Necropotence and then pay 8 life or 9 life to get the best 7 card hand they can to then try to kill you on your turn or on the following turn.
Right.
Yeah. So, if you've ever heard of the phrase combo winter, that was when you had Necropotence and Memory Jar and Tolarian Academy from the Saga block. So Necro played a part in that, I do believe.
Yeah.
Okay. So being able to trade, that's why Gitaxian Probe, pay 2 life, look at your opponent's hand, and draw a card. Right? 2 life for a card is probably fine, but then tacking the see your opponent's hand was too good.
Right.
So, and 2 life.
But I mean, just paying 2 life for a peak isn't good enough either, though.
That's what I was gonna say. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like the combination of like 2 life draw a card is probably fine. Like Street Wraith is fine. Not great, but fine. But
Well,
like,
I mean, it certainly plays a role in the decks that want it, though.
it does. But what I mean is like it's not banned in every format.
Right.
Where Gitaxian Probe is banned in every format.
Right.
Because it counts as casting a spell and all this stuff. So like 1 life for a card is like probably above rate or like just the right rate with no other effect on it. 2 life for a card is probably maybe too much. So it's like somewhere in there. A card that you draw, typically you're willing to pay like a life for.
Right. And like you guys have probably heard us like evaluate cards this way also during spoiler seasons or whatever. We'll talk about, would you pay 3 mana for draw a card? No, probably not. Would you pay 3 mana for draw a card, put an extra land into play? Well, no, that's just kind of a worse explore. But then you add 3 life, and then you add the ability to cast it out of your graveyard, and all of a sudden you got a broken Magic card.
Well, I mean, Cultivate is kind of draw a land, draw 2 lands, put 1 into play. So I guess it's draw 2. It's Cultivate. But like it's like all the little things. Like there are all these knobs that get turned on Magic cards, and if you turn one knob a little too far, one way or the other, it takes it from like playable to busted. And that sometimes is a really fine line. Like Gitaxian Probe at just 2 life draw card is playable but not busted. But then the version where it's like kind of everything, peak and draw a card for 2 life is too much.
Yep.
So this was kind of the Philosophy of Fire was kind of the first attempt to think about like what a card is worth. And I think people who play mono red still kind of adhere to the Philosophy of Fire, at least the third part of it, where they look at it as like each card in my deck is worth so many of your life points. Like my goal is to cast no more than 7 spells and have you dead. And like ideally I cast 6 spells and I kill you. So I can kill you on turn 3.
Yeah, I mean, that's how, it's not currently built that way, but that's how modern Burn used to be. You would look at your opening hand and say, okay, I've got 18 points in my hand. I'm assuming my opponent's going to do 2 points to themselves. Given no other circumstances, I have them dead in my hand.
Yeah, I have them dead in my hand, or I have, 15 points, but I'm hoping to draw, 5 points worth of burn off the top of my deck.
Right.
And all of my cards are 1 mana deal 3s.
Right.
Like that's why creatures were so valuable in that deck. A lot of burn players wouldn't keep an opening hand unless it had a creature in it.
Yeah.
Because a Goblin Guide is often worth 4 damage or 6 damage.
6. Yeah.
And so it like Goblin Guide kind of draws you a card. Because when it deals that 6 damage, that's 1 less card you had to cast.
Right.
To get you, to get them dead. So that was the first thing, was just looking at it as cards are worth your opponent's cards, some portion of your life, or your opponent's life.
Yep. Like I said, that was like one of the very first articles that attempted to understand, kind of the base game theory, I guess is a way to say it. But like actual what the cards do, like break the game down into resources.
Yeah.
And then not long after that, Zvi Mauschwitz wrote an article called The Grand Unifying Theory that kind of expanded on what Mike Flores had said. And he basically said that the lightning bolt, where you have 1 red mana, deals 3 damage to an opponent or 3 damage to a creature. That meant that not only is a card worth 3 of your opponent's life points or a creature card, but that 1 red mana had a value in that also.
Gotcha. Okay.
So this kind of, like, they didn't call it tempo at the time, but this kind of like rolls into I remember we did one episode kind of talking about tempo a little bit, and this kind of builds into the idea of gaining tempo.
This is
So
you'll hear a lot, especially like in current like standard, that let's say Aether Gust trades up on mana, right?
Right.
The reason you can't play, or it's hard to play 5 mana and 6 mana do nothing like green spells, just big sorcery speed tap out green stuff.
Elder Gargaroth.
Elder Gargaroth is because your opponent you tap 5 mana and your opponent taps 2 and they take care of, in air quotes, your Elder Gargaroth for a turn.
Right.
Like you get to redraw that card, but you're burning a draw step, so like they're still trading 1 for 1, right? Because they traded the card you would have drawn for the card you just played, but they're eating 5 of your mana for 2. So they got to make a 3 mana play and then still have 2 mana left over to do something. So this is similar, that 1 red mana is a cost that you could have used that 1 red mana for something else. But if you trade that 1 mana for a 3 mana creature, you're in a better position than your opponent because you had extra mana that you could have done something else, and they used all 3 of their mana.
Yeah. I kind of came up with a scenario back to relating it to red deck wins, where if you spent 2 mana on your turn to cast like a runaway Steamkin, okay, you still made reasonable use of your 3rd turn, and you left 1 red mana up, and your opponent casts, some 3 mana creature with 3 toughness. Like, was it Garrick's Harbinger? Is like the new thing, 1 green for a 4/3.
Yes.
If you kill that with your lightning bolt, you didn't just trade your lightning bolt for their Garrick's Harbinger. You also ate their whole turn. So on your turn, you got to progress your board by playing your runaway Steamkin, and then you killed their thing with your leftover mana, whereas they spent their entire turn to cast that thing that you just killed for 1 mana.
Yeah, so it's the idea of you traded 1 mana for 3.
Yeah.
Like, you'll hear about needing to get to a point in the game where you can start double spelling. And like that's why cheap spells that are really functional are so important, because it lets you develop your board plus interact, or filter your next draw plus play a creature or whatever, right? But getting to do 2 things a turn because you're using your mana efficiently is really important. And when you can make your opponent use their mana either in an inefficient way or in a way that can benefit you is really important.
Yeah. There's a certain value to your untap step. And basically what you're doing in this scenario is you're trading the 1 card in your hand for the 1 card in your opponent's hand, but you're also taking away their untap step.
Yeah, so this is where, I know we've said it before, maybe explained it, the concept you might hear someone say like, oh, then I time walk them.
Yeah. Meaning
that you invalidated their entire turn. Right. So like this is why we don't get counterspell in standard, because like 2 mana for take care of whatever your opponent did is too powerful, because again, they spent 5 mana and you spent 2.
Right.
And like it's too easy to hold up 2 mana. To just randomly have 2 mana is a lot harder to randomly have 3 mana in the early part of the game. So that's why 3 mana counterspells are what we get in standard, because having to hold up 3 mana is a cost because you're not getting to do something else. Because the odds of you, it's turn 5, you want to play, you'd rather play a 3-drop and hold up 2 mana that you might not get to use than play a 2-drop and then hold up 3 mana you might not get to use. Right? There's a way greater cost to you burning that 3 mana than there is to you burning the 2 mana if you don't get to cast your counterspell.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the reasons why it's kind of relevant now, because we just got it added into Historic, but that's why hieroglyphic illumination.
Yeah.
was a playable card. Like a 4 mana draw 2 isn't, particularly exciting, but it cycles for mana. So if you have a turn where, you have an extra mana kicking around, it's worth something to do something with that mana, even if it's just trade it for another card. You know what I mean?
Yeah, just get rid of it and get a little bit deeper in your deck.
Yeah.
Right, and you know that 4 mana draw 2 isn't good enough if you look at all the versions of that card we've had recently. There's
Glimmer saw play.
Well, yeah, but Glimmer was 4 mana
draw 2, get 2 energy.
Did you scry? Was it scry 2, draw 2?
Oh, was it? I thought it was just draw 2, get 2 energy.
I thought it was scry 2, draw 2. I was gonna but they always maybe there was a get 2 energy one, but they always have to tack something extra onto that card, right? Yep. Because Inspiration, which was the first version of this card from Visions, I'm old. Right, that card is like not even playable unlimited now. They have to tack something else on it. And
you're right. It's scry 2, draw 2, get 2 energy.
Yeah. They didn't know how much energy was worth. But Hieroglyphic Illumination had like the flexibility, that extra mode. So like being able to trade a mana for a card is worthwhile.
Mm-hmm. And this was also part of the problem with Big Teferi, right? The 5 mana Teferi
that really costs 3 mana.
That's exactly the thing. Is you spent your 5 mana to cast Teferi, and then you got to draw a card, and then you also had 2 mana left over to protect him on your opponent's turn.
Yeah, so it was really kind of a 3 mana Planeswalker because it didn't like leave you tapped out. You could hold up Negate or Dovin's Veto or whatever 2 mana interaction seal away that you needed to hold up to protect your Teferi. So, yeah, like anything that like the Grand Unifying Theory takes into account the mana cost of things, right? The philosophy of Fire was here's how much a card is worth relative to other cards in life. Yeah. But then the Grand Unifying Theory was, hey, you had to spend some amount of resource on that card. Right. Not just the card itself was spent, but mana. So there was an opportunity cost. You could have done something else with that mana. And so that's why, again, like the idea of trading up is something that comes up all the time. Like if you listen to the game, I guess it's the Arena Decklist podcast now, right? They constantly talk about, you can't play that because they trade up. Your opponent trades up on mana with this card or that card. Like, which is why like Mystical Dispute gets played so much because it's 1 mana. Yeah. Eat anything. Like eat any blue spell, and it's just like, oh no, I just like lost. Like you feel like you've lost the game, and you may have lost the game if you tap out for something and they pay 1 mana to counter it.
Right. And then tap 3 in their Escanta to look at the top 4 cards and draw a card.
And that's also why we don't get 1 mana removal. Yeah. In like Standard anymore, because you tap 4 mana and play like a 4/4. You play your Questing Beast, like, and then your opponent pays 1 mana and plays Path to Exile or like Swords to Plowshares. Right. Where then it's just like, oh no. Yep. This was awful.
Well, I mean, we did get Fatal Push not that long ago.
We did get Fatal Push, like, we say not that long ago, but isn't it like 4 years ago now?
No, really?
Yeah, Aether Revolt was a long time ago, I think.
Oh, you're making me feel old, buddy.
I think. I might be wrong. Maybe it was 3 years. I've got
Google will tell us.
I've got a lot of boxes of cards between Kaladesh, Aether Revolt, and now.
January 20th, 2017. 3 years ago.
So 3 years. Okay. So not.
I mean, it's not
bad.
that long ago.
But I mean, even it's conditional, right? Like in its default mode, you get to trade up 1 mana. Right. It's it's different than something like you have to do a little bit of work to make it trade. Yeah. Like trade up like 3 mana to get a 4-drop. But that's but the idea of being mana efficient and using all of your mana right, is kind of exemplified by this because every mana you don't use has a cost, just like every mana just like every mana you, yeah, like the idea that your mana spoils each turn, and just like every mana that you spend could have been spent doing something else. So you want to do the most impactful thing for each mana that you spend, in addition to each card that you spend.
That's I mean, it's one of the reasons why, like, Boomer Magic or like Jund is a deck. You know what I mean? It's all these very efficient cards that let you double spell multiple turns in a row early in the game and don't leave you dead.
Yeah, you get to go like a piece of interaction, a threat, another piece of interaction, like, and then another threat across your first like 3 turns. Like you've played 4 or 5 spells in your first 3 turns. You've neutralized 2 to 3 of your opponent's threats, and you have a threat or 2 of your own, all for like 6 mana total. And like that, again, that's why that works, is you squeeze their resources, trading 1 for 1, and then you just have better cards to draw later in the game.
Yep.
So
yeah, but like you're not relying on like the philosophy of fire as much as you are the grand unifying theory, because you're able to capitalize on your interaction being less expensive than your opponent's threat.
Yeah, so your opponent plays a 3-drop and you play a Terminate, so you traded 2 mana for 3, and then the next turn you like play a 2 mana Tarmogoyf and you have 1 mana up, and then maybe again they play another 3-drop and you have a Lightning Bolt to take care of that. So now you've got your threat plus you've dealt with their threat, and now you can like kind of turn the corner and start being aggressive. Yeah,
and like it works both ways also, though. If you thought seize your opponent on turn 2 and you take their only 2-drop and all they have is 3 drops, you gained a turn from them. You know what I mean? They're going to play their land and pass because they don't have anything to do.
Yeah. So after that, we have The Theory of Everything, which I feel like is a Stephen Hawking book.
It was something. I don't remember what he's... Oh, was it Carl Sagan?
Was it Carl? Maybe it was Carl Sagan.
He took it. He did take it from somebody. And this is by Patrick Chapin, who for a long time was, one of the great minds behind the game, as far as, deck building and competitive play and everything.
It was Stephen Hawking, and it was
Stephen Hawking?
Also the name of the movie about him in 2014.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
There you go. You found it.
I feel like I read that book, but okay.
No, I did not. So what Patrick did was he wanted to kind of take all of this information that Zvi and Mike Flores had been working on and kind of lump it all together in one place and add some of his own thoughts behind it. So he came up with this great big theory, kind of all about exactly what we're trying to get to here, is what a card is worth. And he basically breaks it down into like 3 building blocks. So the building blocks are resources that you have in the game of Magic. The first one is resources that you begin the game with, but do not gain naturally over time. And this is basically what the philosophy of fire was saying. This includes the ability to continue the game. So that's either having life total still, or having cards in your library so you can continue to draw and not lose, or not having poison and, still being able to continue playing the game. This is very much, relates back to that necropotence thing from the philosophy of fire, where kind of the only life point that matters is your last one. It doesn't matter how you get there. As long as you still have a life point, you can still continue to play the game.
Yeah, you're kind of trading resources, cards, and your life to take all of your opponent's life. You don't really kind of care. It doesn't have to be pretty or efficient all the time. It just has to get them dead.
Right. The second building block is resources that you gain naturally over time, but don't start the game with. And this is where was it unifying theory?
Yeah.
comes into play where we're talking about tempo. These are things like your untap steps, your land drops, your attack steps, things that you don't have when you start your game of Magic, but you get naturally every turn. You can either exploit parts of your turn or take parts of your opponent's turn away to unnaturally gain these things also. Like we had mentioned, if you spend 1 mana to take care of your opponent's 3 mana threat on turn 3, and you were able to use that 2 mana, you have basically gained an extra untap step through denying your opponent one.
And a lot of times decks that want to be tempo positive, that taking care of your opponent's creature might not be killing it. It might be something as simple as like an unsummon, where you've invalidated their untap step because they used all their mana and you used 1 to bounce their thing. Right. So now you get an extra untap step. You kind of know what they're going to do the next turn because they're going to maybe replay that same spell. So now you can prepare to know how to deal with it. But you didn't even trade a card for a card. Unsummon trades a card for their mana for that turn. You're like, I'm willing to pay a card for your 3 mana. And if you already have like a threat on board, that is sometimes enough of an impact that it can allow you to like get a grip in the game and like start to snowball where now you're getting more cards and draw steps.
Right. This is kind of why Brazen Borrow was a good card, right?
Yeah. Well, it's unsummon that draws you a card.
Yeah.
So like it's the classic tempo play of you play a 3 or a 4 mana thing, I'll pay 2 mana to put it back in your hand, but then it also becomes like a creature. So it's tempo plus it's also card advantage, which we'll talk about here in a second.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Are you ready to talk about that now, or you got anything else for tempo?
We can talk about card advantage, sure. So what's the next one?
These are resources that you begin the game with and you gain naturally over time. And there's 2 different things to think about here, and that's card advantage and card economy. So card advantage is going above and beyond what your card can do. So if your 1 card can trade for 1 of your opponent's card, that's like base level, right?
Yeah.
Card advantage is if 1 of your cards can trade for 2 of your opponent's cards. Or if 1 of your cards can get you 2 cards.
Yeah, so basically it's trying to just see more cards than your opponent, because the more cards you see, the more just raw resources you have. And the more resources you have, the better you should be able to turn those resources into a victory.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just seeing more cards, though. I mean, if you cast a Wrath of God and kill 3 of your opponent's creatures, that's
fair.
Still card advantage.
Yeah, it is. If you think about it, like if you cast a Wrath of God, after you cast a Wrath of God, if you count the cards in your hand and count the cards in your opponent's hand, you're going to have more resources than your opponent. Right? The resource you might be lower on is life, but that resource, and I think in all of these, your last life point is the only one that truly matters. Right? So like as a control player, a lot of times they have to go to like 2 or 3 before they can like wrest control of the game away.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why that Azorius control deck back in like RTR Theros Standard was so good, because it Elixir of Immortality like bought you the time where you could go down to 1 life and then all of a sudden be back up at 5 life, plus put all of the spells that you've utilized already back into your deck to use again.
So Elixir of Immortality was 1 mana for an artifact that you tap, sack, gain 5 life, and then shuffle your graveyard into your
back into your library. Yep.
But like Elixir shuffled itself back in as well.
Yes.
So like they could win the game through decking you, or just making you quit. I think basically those were the only ways they could win. Like I don't think I guess later on they had like Big Elspeth, but I think for a while they just like
Well,
Their
some of
win
them played like Aetherling too, right?
I think. I just remember like the games just like there was like a lot of times there were just no win cons.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you're able to turn like you're turning your cards from into more than one card. So instead of trading 1 for 1, you're trading 2 for 1 or 3 for 1.
Yep.
Right? So cards like, like Hydroid Crisis, right? It's like oftentimes it's a 3 for 1 in its like worst case most of the time, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like it's a 4/4 that drew you 2 cards.
Right. And then it's still a card.
And then it's still a card that has to be traded with a card from your opponent's hand.
Right.
So, right, like that's a 3 for 1. That is card advantage. That is a creature and then the 2 cards that came along into your hand.
Yep.
Right. So that's card advantage. Just like getting raw numbers. Either one of your cards eating multiples of your opponent's cards, or one of your cards getting you more resources so that you can trade them 1 for 1.
Yep. Like we said, divination is +1 card advantage. You are up a card.
This is why like Chemister's Insight, right, is it was +1 card on the front end, and then still +1 card on the back end. So it was one card that for a lot of mana, but you could spread it out, was actually +2 cards.
Right.
It was like 8 mana +2 cards.
I mean, it was worth slightly more than +2 cards, though, because you're discarding whatever your worst card is at the time, which is probably worth less than a card.
Yeah, like your 15th land doesn't matter.
Right.
You'll get the job done with 14, so you're going to trade that 15th land for hopefully 2 good
Something
cards.
That's not a land.
Yes. 2 spells, just any spells at that point.
Yep. And that kind of relates to what we're going to talk about next, which is card economy, which is a little bit different from card advantage. Card economy is more about the quality of the card. Like at a base level, a Tarmogoyf is a better card than a Grizzly Bear.
Yeah, and so this is going back to your Jund example. Jund is not a card advantage deck.
Right.
It is a card economy deck. Every card in the deck is really good. Your goal is to run your opponent out of resources so that you're both drawing 1 resource a turn. And your hope is that your 1 resource is better than the 1 resource they drew.
Yeah. We can kind of relate this to card advantage. So if every card in your deck is worth 1.2 cards and every card in your opponent's deck is worth 1 card, it might take you 10 of your cards to equal a 2 for 1, but eventually you're going to get there.
Yeah.
And your cards will just be worth more than your opponent's.
So, like, the idea of your card being worth more than a card, like, in a fractional sense, going back to Tarmogoyf, like, kind of the established rate, like, what you can expect to pay, if you pay 2 mana, what you expect to get, has changed a little over the years, but it's probably somewhere around like now like a 2/2, anywhere from a 3/2 to a 2/3, somewhere in there, with an ability.
This is the world we live in.
Right. So, for example, like Gifted Aetherborn is black, so it's harder to cast, but it's a 2/3 with lifelink and death touch.
Right.
Right. Or you have Glint Sleeve Siphoner, one in a black for a 2/1, and when it attacks, you get energy, and then you can spend 2 energy to draw a card.
Right.
Right. Like the baseline card used to be a Grizzly Bear, one in a green for a 2/2.
Right.
Even on the like kind of new scale of 2-drop creatures, right? Tarmogoyf that is 2 mana for a 3/4 or a 4/5 is still like above rate. It's better than what your opponent's 2-drops are typically going to be.
Absolutely.
So then that puts you ahead. You spent 2 mana and got something that was above rate, better than the average 2-drop. And then your opponent spent 2 mana and hopefully got like an average 2-drop. So now you're ahead because your 2-drop is better than theirs.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so you can also think like to get rid of your 2-drop, they would have to invest maybe 2 cards.
Yep.
Right? So that's how you can think about it as being like ahead, because maybe they have the fatal push and just kill it outright, but maybe they have to block and then spend a lightning bolt to kill it.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's eaten 2 of their cards. So some percentage of the time they just 1-for-1 it, but then some percentage of the time they 2-for-1 themselves to get rid of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, like this is why Jund has problems with Tron, because because Jund is drawing, 2 mana 4/5s, and Tron is tapping 3 lands and playing 7 mana planeswalkers. Right? Their card quality in Tron is just so much better than the card quality in Jund.
Yeah, a 6 mana 6/6 that dies into 2 3/3s.
Yes.
Is pretty tough to deal with when you're trying to 1-for-1 your opponent.
Exactly. So like, decks that are just built on having purely the best cards, having the best card economy, right? That's why those matchups can skew the way that they do, because Tron is built to have the mana to cast the best possible cards for tapping 3 lands.
Right.
And Jund is built to play the best cards you can tap, or you can play when you tap 3 lands and get 3 mana.
Mm-hmm.
So then you lose because you're playing 3 mana stuff and they're playing 7 mana stuff.
Yeah.
So
it's tough.
It's tough. Didn't mean to make you sad there, but that was the...
No, that's fine.
Right.
Something you expect when you're a Jund player is you just
to hear
lose
about Tron.
to Tron. So yeah, it's fine.
So you have the philosophy of fire, where you're like trading resources that you start the game with, but that you don't actually gain.
Right. Without taking some action.
Without doing something. You don't gain life from doing nothing. You have to spend a card for that.
Yeah, you don't put cards back in your deck for taking your turn. You don't heal poison over time.
Yeah. Right. So you have that, and then you have tempo, which is basically trying to maximize kind of the game actions that are built into the game. Right? Mm-hmm. It's maximizing untap steps and maximizing draw steps. Right?
Yeah, or denying them from your opponent.
Exactly.
Like, it works both ways.
Exactly. Getting the most out of each of the built-in game mechanics. Right? Again, like Delver, right? It's a 1 mana. It's a 1 mana 3/2. Right. So that is maximizing your attack steps. Right. You've spent the least amount of mana possible, 1 mana, not counting like Memnite, to get the best creature you possibly can for your 1 mana.
Yeah.
So then that's going to maximize each of your attack steps. Like if it flips on turn 2, now you have a 3/2 attacking starting on turn 2.
Right.
Right, and that's the best possible thing you can have attacking on turn 2.
Mm-hmm. And that's also why Delver plays things like Daze and Force of Will, where you've gained so much tempo by use of very efficient threats that you are kind of willing to give some of it away by, setting yourself back a land drop in the case of Daze, or, getting rid of a card in your hand in the case of Force of Will.
And Wasteland's the same way.
Yeah. Yep.
You're willing to give up a land drop to keep your opponent from developing.
Yeah, or keep them from answering your 1 mana threat.
Right, so that's why you hear it like you're not supposed to wasteland your opponent unless you have a threat.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There are, caveats to that, but it's like you don't want to put yourself behind.
Right.
If they could then just like keep playing, and then you can't utilize the fact that you put them behind a land.
Right.
Like you don't want to just be like, haha, we both have no land. Right? You didn't do anything. Like basically the game has you've just started the game over. But like you're down a card.
Right.
And didn't do anything. Where it would be much better to play your threat and then the next turn wasteland them. Now you have a clock that they have to deal with, and you've like constrained their mana.
Yep. Makes a lot of sense.
Right. And then the last thing is card economy or card advantage, right? Just being
Well,
able
yeah,
to,
they kind of go hand in hand, but
yeah,
it is important to note that they're different things.
but just being able to get more out of your cards than your opponent gets out of their cards, either in like
Right.
raw numbers of cards or in quality of card,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So
They're both kind of the same thing.
So it doesn't really 100% answer what a card's worth because it really depends on what kind of game you're playing. Because
Absolutely.
a player who is interested in card economy, right, is never going to go 1 mana lightning bolt your face.
Right.
Right, because that 3 life isn't worth a card to them.
Right.
Right. Whereas someone who's playing burn, that's all their card is worth to them, right? In their strategy is, or most of its worth is 1 mana, deal 3. But for a control player, it's 1 mana, kill a creature, and then some long way down the road, when you have no creatures anymore, then it becomes worth 3 damage.
Yep.
Right? Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same way in Jund, too. Like, you're not going to bolt somebody if they're at 18. You're going to hold it up for a creature.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, what a card is worth really depends on, like, how you're playing. Right? And, like, similar, like, in a tempo deck, that lightning bolt is probably more important as a tempo play to deal with a threat, you know, eat their turn. And then there comes a point where you kind of flip the script, and now that's worth, like they're at 12 and you're like, bolt, untap, bolt, attack you.
Right.
And win the game like that. So like you have to recognize when the value switches from being a thing that's worth a card to being 3 life.
Yeah, and like sideboarding kind of plays a role in this too. Whereas like depending on the matchup that you're in, your cards can change value drastically, right?
Yeah. Right. There are like, you know, you have, I guess the best example of this is like you have removal spells against a deck that has no creatures, right? Your removal spells are literally worth nothing.
Well, I mean, they're worth less than nothing.
Yeah, like they're eaten a
costing
draw
you
step.
a card out of your deck. Yeah,
Yeah, they've eaten a draw step. Where then you play against someone who's playing like mono white, and all you want to draw is your removal spells,
right.
Because you know a lot of times in mono white, their creatures are maybe above rate on their own, but they're definitely above rate as they work together.
Yeah. I kind of have a really good example of this.
Okay.
Just from yesterday, I was playing that Rakdos Pyromancer deck that I was telling you about. And I had the only deck that I had lost to in like 6 hours of playing was Goblins. So what I did was I just played all of my removal spells. I had like 7 different removal spells in my sideboard, like Abrades, Magma Sprays, you know, whatever. And I just took out all the stuff that, you know, I wasn't going to get to if I was dead, like the Call of the Death Dweller and some of the Claim to Fames and that kind of stuff. And I just played all of my removal spells and made it so that their deck just didn't function because I just killed everything. And then, you know, eventually my removal spells would turn into a 1/1 when I stuck a Pyromancer and I'd win that way.
Yeah. You mentioned something there that might have slid by some people, which is you said like cards that I wouldn't get to when I was dead.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I'm glad you brought this up. This is a good thing to talk about that I didn't even have in our notes.
Mono red players, like the P. Sellys, the Patrick Sullivans of the world, talk about mono red's version of card advantage is how many cards are in your opponent's hand when they're dead.
Right.
Right.
And this kind of relates to tempo too.
Yeah. So if you shorten the game somehow, where you don't give your opponent the time to use their cards, right? People can look at that sometimes as being card advantage. Yeah. You traded your hand, or you traded whatever resources you spent for their life total plus all the cards they had.
Right.
So there will be times where like tempo or card advantage is the fact that your opponent didn't get to use a card. So the reason tempo decks typically, we talk about them having to have a clock or some sort of threat, is you playing an unsummon on their 3-drop doesn't cost them a card, but if they never get to cast that 3-drop again, because you were pressuring them in such a way where they could not use that mana that way, where they're like, okay, well, I'll play my 4-drop, and now I'll try to play a different 3-drop, and okay, that got counted on turn 5, so now I don't have mana to play the 3-drop that got bounced, right? If you can end the game without having them played that card, you are up a card, right? But if the game goes so long that they get to redeploy that card, right? They've played all the other cards in their hand and they play that card. Now you're down a card, because they get to reuse that card. But if the game ends, it doesn't matter that you put that card back in their hand, which is another reason why Brazen Borrower is good. It's like, bounce your thing. Now I have a clock.
Right.
Now I have this like evasive 3-power threat, and you might not get to replay that card. Or you replaying that card means you didn't get to play another card.
Right.
So I'm not going to give you time to get that mana back, because I'm playing a bunch of 1 and 2 mana spells, and then I don't get to win the game if you're playing, consistently 4 and 5 mana spells that get to resolve.
Yep.
So,
exactly.
Yeah. So like recognizing when like, oh, the game's not gonna go long enough for me to play a 5-drop.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I need to take that 5 mana spell out of my deck and put something in my deck that I will actually get to play.
Yeah, I mean,
Quality.
This kind of relates to like going big or going small too, that we have covered on the show before, where like after sideboarding, if you're trying to go a little bit bigger than your opponent, you remove some of your early stuff and put in some bigger stuff. Whereas if you're trying to go under your opponent, you remove some of your bigger stuff and concentrate on your early stuff.
You want to make sure that you're maximizing your mana. Or I guess the other thing is going back to that like trading up on mana. You don't want to, if your opponent's playing a bunch of 2 mana removal or 2 mana interaction, you don't want to like be spending 5 mana to have it taken care of with a 2 mana spell. You'd rather make it so you take out your 5 drops and you put in 2 and 3 drops, so they're not getting as much of a mana advantage from each play. So it still sets you back if they, bounce your 2 mana play, but if you can play 2 drops on turn 4, you've kind of got that mana back in a sense, as opposed to trying to play 1 4-drop.
Yeah.
So we've kind of talked about different ways that cards are used and kind of what their value is and, how it changes.
Yeah. And like we had talked a little bit about previously, cards that are being worth like slightly more than a card, like, 1.2 cards or 1.5 cards or whatever. And like now we're going to talk about like how that works, and, not necessarily, what is worth a portion of a card, but how like smaller pieces can come together to be worth more than a card.
Yeah. So the thing I wanted to talk about that I wanted to bring into this was the idea of the value of cards that are flexible.
Yeah.
That do more than one thing. And we've seen a lot more of that recently. I don't know if it is just a general change in design, or I know when we first started to see a lot of them, it was attributed a lot to like best of one.
Yeah. I was just going to say that.
Where like, oh, hey, they're not going to play with sideboard, so they have to have general answers to things, to a wide range of things.
Yep.
But there are like cards that are flexible that do a lot of different things because that's clearly on the card. And then there are cards that are sneaky flexible.
Okay.
That you might not read them and read them as like, oh, this card is really flexible.
Okay.
Right? And like the first example of that is, and it's kind of apropos with Zendikar coming, which are modal cards.
Right.
Cards that have different modes. So like Kicker is kind of the quintessential example. There is an argument that everything in Magic is just a different form of Kicker. So
yeah, that is kind of the running joke, right?
Yeah. So Kicker is you pay some additional cost to get an additional or different effect on your card.
Right.
So what this does is maybe at 1 mana the card does something, but then it has a kicker for 3 mana, and now it gets a bonus. So there was in Dominaria, there was a 1 mana 1/1 with menace for black, but it had kicker 3. So and it got 2 +1/+1 counters.
Okay.
So it was a 1 mana 1/1 with menace, which is but it was also a 4 mana 3/3 with menace, which is also but the fact that it got to be at 2 different spots made it okay. Right? So having cards that have the ability to do different things, like Collective Brutality, it's Escalate is the mechanic there. I couldn't think of what it was called before. Right?
Yeah, it's Kicker.
It's Kicker, right? It's like for Collective Brutality, it's Escalate, discard a card to choose an additional mode. It could just say Kicker, discard a card, right? But, that card gets played in Modern and Legacy because it has effectively different ways it can work depending on what you need it to do. Right? So it's not always a removal spell. It's not always a discard spell. It's not always a burn spell. It's whichever one of those things or combination of those things is best for you at that time. Right? Against like mono red, sometimes it's good to just go like, I'll pay 2 mana, discard 2 cards, kill your thing, drain you for 2, so now I have a slightly better life buffer, and take a burn spell out of your hand. Right? And you've traded resources, but you feel like you're up on that exchange. And just, you wouldn't put 2 mana for Duress in your deck.
No.
But
a lot of times Duress doesn't even make the cut.
Yeah. You wouldn't put 2 mana, deal 2, gain 2.
Right.
You wouldn't put 2 mana, neg 1, right? Like Duress is 1 mana.
It's neg 2, isn't it?
It's, neg 2. What is the 1 black? Disfigure. Disfigure is 1 mana for neg 2, right? But the fact that the card gets to be one of them or both of them increases its value. It has less times that it's dead.
Yeah.
It's, as a sideboard card, it's more live against different opponents. Right?
Yeah, and like the kicker cost being discarding a card lets you trade up portions of a card as well. Because if you're discarding cards that in this situation, this matchup aren't worth a whole card for something that is absolutely worth a whole card in your opponent's hand, you're gaining fractions of a card for each mode.
Yeah, like you're playing against mono red and you have Veil of Summer in your main deck.
Right.
You're just like, well, this just needs to go into the trash can, but if you can get a card for it on its way to the trash can.
Right.
And also Collective Brutality also has the discarding for value aspect of it. Right.
Right.
But like just cards that like have alternate ways to pay or have different modes that you can use makes them more valuable.
Right.
Right. Then there's like cards that you might not realize are flexible, but are just cards that have extra things stapled onto them.
Okay.
So, Uro. I think
Uro's got a lot of stuff stapled to it.
I think that
Uro might even be a bulletin board.
He might. he's just a telephone pole like outside of a crappy club with like bad bands every week. He's just got tons of stuff stapled to him. But Uro is probably playable if it's draw a card, put a land in the play. But they
absolutely.
But they stapled 3 life onto it, right? Like, so it not only like draws you a card and gets you a hit on mana. It also, we're gonna talk about this later, gives you time to get there. but they just stapled 3 mana onto it, or 3 life onto it because.
Yep.
Right? Rogue Refiner, if we go back a little bit later. So Rogue Refiner was 1 green-blue for a 3/2 that entered the battlefield and drew you a card and gave you 2 energy. Right. That card is probably playable as just 1 green-blue, 3/2 draw card.
Well, in that format, it was also absolutely playable as 3 mana, 3/2 get 2 energy.
Yes. But either stapling the energy or stapling the card onto it, right, gave it more utility than it would otherwise have.
Yeah.
Right? So just cards that are giving you something extra when they don't have to. Right? This is
that card was also kind of sneaky good because like it didn't see a whole lot of play when it first came out. It was kind of a slow burn. People took a while to warm up to it and realize what it could do.
And just the fact that a 3 mana 3/2 is not above rate, but usually the like 3 mana draw card creature is a 2/2.
Yeah. Yep.
But just things that have a little bit extra on them that they don't really need to have, but are just there for, kind of a like seemingly an unknown reason, right? Like Gifted Aetherborn could, like we talked about it, black for a 2/3 lifelink Death Touch. It would probably just be fine as a 2/3 lifelink or a 2/3 Death Touch, right? But since it has Death Touch, it's like secretly a removal spell. But it's also a threat against control. Yeah. And it's also something that has to be answered against mono red because it gains you 2 life.
Well, it also trades up against a lot of their threats.
Yeah. So it does all these little extra things that when you first look at the card, you don't process it. Oh, it's like, this is a removal spell, a threat, and a way to gain life all rolled up into one card.
You know another good example of this is Thraben Inspector.
Oh, yeah. Like, when that card was legal, so white for a 1/2, when it came into play, it made a clue.
Right.
That might have been, like, in the top 2 or 3 best cards in Mardu Vehicles.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, that was the card you always wanted to have in your hand on turn 1. Right? So it wasn't just, like, a body that eventually replaced itself. It also gave you an artifact to turn on Toolcraft Exemplar.
Yep.
It, like, was a...
let you drew late in the game.
Yeah, it would let you crew things. It just gave you so many extra things that you didn't realize, right? So it could have been a 1-mana 1/1, and that would have been fine. It would have died to Shade Whirler.
Yep.
Right, but it was a 1/2, so it got to live through Chain Whirler. I don't know, like, what you could have given it other than make a clue. Like, that was the big part of it. It could have been like an 0/1, and I think it might have still been playable.
Probably.
Right? So, like, just cards that have, like, a little bit extra tacked onto them. Right? And then there's...
like you like to say, secret modes.
Secret modes. And then you have the clearly flexible cards. The cards that are, like, in-your-face flexible.
Yeah.
Right? So, a Braid... right? It kills a creature or an artifact at a rate that you're happy paying for either. Or pretty close to a rate you're happy paying for either.
Yeah, neither of them are fantastic, like on the surface. Like, you'd rather play a lightning strike than deal 3 damage to a creature, and you'd rather pay...
red.
I don't know. Yeah, for red to destroy an artifact instead of 1 in a red. But the fact that you get to choose between either one makes it okay that you're being slightly inefficient at either.
And also, when we talk about sideboards, it's 1 sideboard card to bring in 2 matchups.
Yeah.
You bring it in. Absolutely. You bring it in against your artifact matchup, and you also bring it in against your creature matchup.
Right.
So it just gives you that additional flexibility. Another one that has seen a lot of play, but not as much as I thought it would, was Night of Autumn. This was the, like, card I remember saying, like, I welcome our best of 1 overlords, right? So 1 green-white for a 2/1 that can gain you 3 life when it comes into play. So it's good against burn, and it, like, gives you a blocker. So against burn, it's a 2-for-1, right? It ate one of their 1 mana deal 3 spells.
Right. And it ate one of their attackers.
And it ate an attacker. Or it had to be killed with another one of their spells, right?
Yep.
Or it can be a 4/3. So against control, it can just be a threat. Or against burn, going back to burn, if it's late in the game and they don't have a lot of cards, right? You play a 4/3, now they can't attack through you anymore.
Right.
Right? Now it has to trade 1-for-1, and it could just buy you a turn or two if they don't draw a removal spell right there. Or early in the game, you're like 4/3.
Yep.
Now you've got to kill this. And then it has destroy an artifact or enchantment. So it gets to come in against your artifact or enchantment matchup. It just does a little bit of everything.
Yep, it gets to be a Reclamation Sage.
Yeah, so Reclamation Sage gets played in older formats.
Yep.
Right, and gets played whenever it's legal, right? I got a Reclamation Sage cast against me in Jund the other day.
Did you?
Mm-hmm. And they blew up my Leyline of Sanctity.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it's awful.
That was mean.
Yeah, really mean.
They probably wanted to kill one of your songs.
Probably, but they couldn't make me discard any of them. It does, for having a slightly harder mana cost, because it's 1 green-white as opposed to 2 and a green, right? Mm-hmm. It's just naked Reclamation Sage that then just has all this like extra stuff on it where it can kind of do whatever you need it to do. Or like a card that didn't get played a lot or at all, like Bedevil.
Yeah.
That was destroy a creature, destroy a planeswalker, destroy an artifact. Yep. Right? It just gave you so many things you can do. And those cards are super valuable when you can just kind of have them do multiple things because there's less times that they're dead, so they're a card more often.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Anything that's modal is clearly flexible. So anything that says like, choose one or more or choose 2 or whatever. Like another example is Cryptic Command. It's like, a control player's, dream is Cryptic Command, right? It does a whole bunch of different things. It catches you up on tempo. It draws you cards. It counters spells. It's like everything that control players want in a card all wrapped up in one. And you get to pick 2 of them. So,
yeah, all the commands from dragons, right? Like like Kolaghan's command is the one is like deal 2 to a creature or player. It's like, okay, well that's usually can be made worth a card. Mm-hmm. Make them discard. Well, that's always worth a card.
Right.
Or should be. Destroy an artifact. Well, okay, that could be worth a card. Return a creature from your graveyard to your hand. Well, that's a card. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So it's just always worth 2 cards because it does 2 things. You might have to work to get the 2 cards out of it.
Yeah.
But it's always worth 2 cards.
Yep.
So those cards that just have on them do different things or do multiple things are going to always be worth more than if they just did one of those things because they're just always better than you would expect. So we wanted to talk about the 2 spoilers we got, I guess, late last week. Mm-hmm. So, like, I think Thursday or Friday.
Yeah, that might have been Friday. It was either Thursday or Friday.
And we just, we've talked about the different ways to look at cards, and one of these cards kind of fits into our flexible card slot.
It sure does.
So, do you want to talk about our boy Jace?
Sure. This is the new Jace from Zendikar, Zendikar Rising, Jace Mirror Mage. It's 1 blue for a 4 loyalty planeswalker with kicker 2. It says when Jace Mirror Mage enters the battlefield, if Jace was kicked, create a token that's a copy of Jace Mirror Mage, except it's not legendary and its starting loyalty is 1.
So 2 planeswalkers for 1 card.
Right.
Okay. What does this planeswalker do?
5 mana, 2 planeswalkers. +1 is Scry 2, and then it has a 0 ability that says draw a card and reveal it. Remove a number of loyalty counters equal to that card's converted mana costs from Jace Mirror Mage.
The wording on that is super weird because it's usually like reveal the card and put it in your hand.
Right.
right? But like draw and reveal.
Oh yeah, that is kind of weird.
So like, if you ever get to play in paper with this, make sure you reveal the card before you put it in your hand. I think that's
they probably there's some stuff from Core 21.
Yeah, like Joriel.
Yeah, or like Kyrian Dryad.
Yeah. There's a number of things that want you to like draw a second card for the turn. So Jace is worded that way, I'm sure, to make sure those things work.
Yep.
So this goes back to like a flexible card where at 3 mana, it's a 4 mana planeswalker. At 3 mana, it's a 3 mana planeswalker with full loyalty that has okay abilities. They're not super powerful.
Yeah, it's probably not something that if it was just 3 mana with these 2 abilities, I don't know if it would see play. It probably wouldn't see play.
Yeah, like Scry 2 is worth close to a card, but not a whole card.
Right.
It gets more valuable as the game goes on.
Yeah.
Right. When you just want to find spells or a particular spell and you can just start bottoming stuff.
Yeah.
And then the 0, if you set it up right, you can get a lot of cards off of it, but there's a chance that you just pay 3 mana, 0 it, and hit a 4-drop. And then you've just drawn a card and you're like, oh.
That was awkward.
Yes. The 5 mana mode, I think, is good. Because you can kind of set it up where, like, if you're just interested in, like, hitting land drops or just raw cards, you take the little copy Jace and you plus it. Yeah. And you, like, put a land on top so you know you hit your next land drop, and then you 0 the other one.
Right.
Or, like, you need a Wrath, right? You need to find Shatter the Sky. So you're, like, you play them both, and you're, like, scry 2 to try to find Wrath of God.
Yep.
And, like, you know, you are getting some advantage from the Scry 2, even though it's not huge.
Right.
And so, like, you know, the fact that you kind of have to kill both of the Planeswalkers out of one card is kind of crazy.
Yeah, and, like, the Scry 2 is worth something, too. Like, I mean, how many games have you played with Search for Azcanta where your opponent just doesn't flip the search because looting every turn is worth more than, you know, having the flipped Azcanta?
Or, I mean, think about, like, just Castle Ventress. Like, in the Fires matchups, not that, like, mana mattered when you played against Fires, but, like, you just felt like you were losing every turn they got to, like, Scry 2.
Right.
Like, they paid 5 mana effectively to Scry 2, and you're just like, oh my god, I'm losing so badly to this. Right? Yeah. And you're just getting to do it every turn for free. I think it's Plus Kenobi said, this card is either wildly unplayable or busted. Because that is
nowhere in between.
That is the history of 3 mana blue planeswalkers.
That's true.
Right?
Well, no, I mean, like, original Jace wasn't wildly unplayable or busted. It was fine.
Narset, busted.
Oh yeah.
Hobo Jace, wildly unplayable. Teferi, busted. Oko, busted.
This is true.
Right? Like, is there another 3 mana planeswalker? I guess Uncommon Dovin. Well, kind of wildly unplayable. So,
yeah. Like, Ashiok is just kind of in the middle, though.
Ashiok is kind of in the middle. Okay. Blue-black Ashiok. Either one. Either 3 mana Ashiok. The Born of the Theros one or the War of the Spark one. Fine designs. Take it.
Yeah, I actually forgot about the original Ashiok. I was talking about the War of the Spark one. But both of them are just kind of fine.
Yeah. But I worry that, like, the 5 mana mode is just like really good, especially like when you pair it with, like, Uro, that you're getting the 5 mana mode on turn 4.
Yeah.
Right now, your opponent has to deal with 2 planeswalkers because now you set up your next draw.
Right.
Right. Like, you feel like awful if your opponent's like Scry 2 bottom, Scry 2 top bottom. You're like, oh man, that card is real good.
That was the best of 4 cards.
Yeah, I am so screwed.
Yeah.
Also, if you're playing against this, I think you always have to kill the copy first. Because
it's easier to kill?
Well, imagine you have a Murderous Rider. Like, isn't the nightmare scenario you kill the real one, and then they play another one, and they have 3?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, if you kill the copy, then the one in their hand is only worth 1 planeswalker.
Right.
Right? Like, so maybe they get to, like, draw a card. But, like, it just seems like if you kill the real one, they just play another one. And then they have 3, and you're like, oh, no. So,
I
like,
hadn't thought of that.
As awkward as it is, like, you're like, okay, I'll kill the one with less loyalty. Because if you have another one in your hand, I don't want to just, like, have, like, Jace Tribal on the other side for me.
Yeah.
And then our other one is a new Nahiri. Yeah,
this is Nahiri, Heir of the Ancients. It's 2 red-white for a 4 loyalty planeswalker. This one has 3 abilities. +1, create a 1/1 white core warrior creature token. You may attach an equipment you control to it. -2, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal a warrior or equipment card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. And -3, Nahiri, Heir of the Ancients, deals damage to target creature or planeswalker equal to twice the number of equipment you control.
So this is kind of the planeswalkers we thought we were moving towards when we got Zombie Lily.
Right.
That was, like, very narrowly focused on a particular creature type or card type. It's like Calyx, right? Calyx is like, I want you to play enchantments.
Right.
Right?
Nahiri says, I want you to play equipment.
Yeah, equipment and warriors. People pointed out that, I think it was Arielax was like, doesn't this just go in every Winota deck? Because apparently Winota's a warrior.
Oh, of course she is.
And then you have Embercleave to go get. Yeah, I forgot Embercleave was a card. I liked. Someone had mentioned, I think it was like Brian Gottlieb, that he doesn't think of Embercleave as an equipment. It's just a fireball because you play it and your opponent just dies.
Right.
And it's like, oh yeah, like you don't think of it as like equipment. I'm going to get a little bit of advantage. It's like, oh, I'm taking 40. Cool. Okay. Yeah, like so. There could be support for, like, a warrior deck, but usually these kind of, like, tribal-centric planeswalkers don't get there until Standard's way bigger.
Right.
Right? Think about, like Sorin got there because we had a really big Standard. And
with a couple different sets that had vampires in it.
Yeah, 2 sets that were just all about vampires.
Yeah.
And then... like just any other random vampire that got thrown in to Standard, right? So like Nahiri is coming into a small Standard.
Yeah.
With, I don't feel like there's a bunch of warriors. Like that's not a creature type I've looked for.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We did look at equipment, and other than Embercleave, there wasn't a ton of equipment.
Shadow Spear is the only other like playable equipment.
Yeah.
So like this set might or probably does have an equipment theme to it.
Yep.
As was pointed out, like those themes are typically not good enough for draft, let alone constructed.
Right.
So my first thought was you could see Nahiri as like a sideboard card and like some sort of like red-white aggressive deck that played warriors, but like you'd bring in Nahiri as a way to like draw cards against control.
Yeah.
Right? Or to like draw your Embercleave or whatever. But I don't know if she's like main deckable because like she's so narrow. Now if they put like 2 or 3 really good equipment in this set, maybe that changes.
Yeah, and I imagine there's going to be. This is supposed to be throwback to like original Zendikar, where it was adventure world and adventuring parties and stuff. So I imagine there's going to be some equipment in here.
Yeah, so hopefully there's a few good things. Also, like the art on this card, like the Nahiri in like her like 3 or 4 cards that I have seen her on, right? She looks wildly different, like different ages, right?
Yeah,
like she's true. Like old, like older, more mature and angry, which was like her shtick in like Shadows block and then War of the Spark. And like this Nahiri looks like she's like 22 and just like, I don't know, the happiest she's ever been. Like it's just wild. Like it's like, this does not look like the same character you have given me. Even like, was it the Lithomancer, the white Like
The one from the commander deck?
yeah, like you can kind of tell, but it's like the Lithomancer one is like significantly like more aged in the face.
Yeah.
It just struck me as like, huh. Like it's like, did the person who draw this was like, how old is she? And they're just like, make it up. Okay, cool. We don't know.
So there is one more warrior that we didn't talk about. I don't know if anybody else has, that is going to be legal in standard.
Okay.
And that's Hectos.
Oh, he's a warrior.
He's a warrior, yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Man, oh man. Too bad you could never put an Embercleave on him.
Yeah.
Like ever. I think the rule is if you make a Warriors deck on Arena, you have to make the name of the deck come out and play. Like it just has to be the name of the deck.
Yeah, I don't know how many people are going to get that reference, though.
That's fine. Okay, if you don't get it from that movie, The Warriors, they also do that same bit in Archer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when they're on the space station, Archer, come out and play. but I get to fight with Spacebot. No. Yeah, I think that you can, like, I think it's just too narrow.
Yeah.
Like, these kind of planeswalkers are the ones that, like, think about the core 20 planeswalkers, right? You had Sarkhan that was like, I like dragons. He didn't get played. You have the Lily that was like, I like zombies. Didn't get played.
Right.
Or was that 19? I don't remember.
I think that was 19.
19. Okay. And then Tezzeret was like, I like artifacts. Didn't get played.
Yeah.
You had Vivian that's just like, I'm really good. Got played.
Right.
And then Ajani, like, gained some life. No one played that Ajani.
Right.
Until, like, the very end. He was, like, a sideboard card, like, mono white.
Yeah.
But those really narrow planeswalkers rarely get played. I mean, if they put a bunch of, like, busted warriors in the set, maybe. But they have to be, like, busted.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And it kind of depends on the equipment, too.
It does. If, like, someone had mentioned, I think, again, on the Arena deck list, like, if they had something like Living Weapon, which is Living Weapon, like, as a thing on a non-Phyrexian plane is weird.
Right.
But, like, if your equipment somehow also turned into, like, creatures, right? So, like, getting an equipment was also getting a thing that could wear an equipment.
Right, but that's what Nahiri does, right?
She gives you a thing to wear equipment, but, like, when you downtake
and attaches the equipment to it.
Yeah, but, like, I'm just saying, like, if you're, like, I guess it seems weird to, like, get an equipment and then put the equipment on a 1/1. Like, equipment usually aren't good enough that putting pants on a 1/1, the pants usually aren't big enough.
Batterskull's good enough to be on a 0/0.
If they give us Batterskull in standard, I will eat a Nahiri if they give us Batterskull.
Well, you know what I mean, though.
Yeah.
Like at what point is it okay for you to have a 1/1 wearing, +3/+3 with some ability?
Like, that might be good. That could be good enough. Where it has to become like a threat. It needs to be like a 4/4. Or like a 3/3 with like evasion or something. Mm-hmm. Like +2/+2 and flying. Okay.
Like what if we just got Colossus Hammer?
That would be fine. I think you could get away with Colossus Hammer.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you're just making like
11/11.
Yeah, you're plus wanting to make 11/11s.
Yeah.
Like, that's fine. Like, that makes your plus on your Nahiri is worth all of a card.
Yeah.
Right? Because they have to kill that creature, or they have to kill your Colossal Hammer or Colossus Hammer or whatever. Right. But if it's just like, or like if it's like a sword, right? Like if it's 3/3 +2/+2, and then like, some ridiculous ability.
Yeah.
But like, they're not going to give us swords.
No, they won't give us swords.
So I think that is pretty much all of the new stuff. We're not going to arena time. There was not that much arena to time, but
no, not really. And then, like we said, next week we're going to go into how these ways to look at cards fit into some of the recent design blunders. and maybe get into a couple spoilers that we get between now and then. And then the week after should be our set review. So
yes.
You got that to look forward to coming up.
So if you have some things about what a card's worth that you want to ask, you can get us at Casual Tripod.
Yep. You can hit us up on Facebook at CasualTryHardMTG. As always, you can drop us an email at show@CasualTryHardMTG.com. Don't forget to support us in whatever way you feel like you can, whether it's our TCG Player affiliate link or more directly on Patreon. Like I said, this week we have some pretty good discussion in our Discord this week about some arena-y stuff. If you want to hop in our Discord, you can do that through the link in the description or the link on our Twitter or the link on Facebook, or you can just get a hold of us and we'll send you a link. Do us a favor and tell your friends about the show. That helps us out as well. And I think that's it for this week, right?
Yeah, I think so. And with that, we'll catch you on the internet.
We'll catch you on the internet.